September 19th, 1961. According to news accounts, Betty and Barney Hill were driving through New Hampshire late at night when a large flying saucer rapidly approached them and then hovered over their car. They saw strange figures through the windows of the craft. And mysteriously, the couple also reported complete memory loss of the 2 hours immediately following the encounter.
No one really knows to this day what Betty and Barney Hill saw. However, the details of their case do reflect on various other versions of alien abduction. I say alien abduction because some of the pieces of information that they discuss, the loss of time, seeing beings that actually came out of this craft and associated and interacted with them, and they weren't human.
Ultimately, under hypnosis, they recall being brought out of the car and taken aboard the ship, that it was a legitimate abduction, and that Betty pleaded with her captors, if you will, that not to harm her as she laid on this table and experiments were done on her, like a needle being inserted into her stomach. Barney relates a number of skin samples and sperm being taken from him.
The beings described by Betty and Barney Hill fit the classic case of a gray. Now, there are variations to size and dimensions of these beings, but they all seem to have the same characteristics. Slim, spindly bodies, large oval heads, large oversized eyes.
The Hills were the first documented case of an alien abduction in modern time. But it is not the last. Since the 1960s, there have been many more similar reports, including that of Kim Carlsberg, a commercial photographer, who in 1988 claimed to have been abducted by gray aliens in the middle of the night.
We were living on the beach in Pacific Palisades, and I walked up to the window and I saw this light on the horizon that I'd never seen before. You know, I'd lived on the beach my whole life, and it wasn't a boat and it wasn't a star. I just watched this craft. The next thing I knew, it jetted into the stars and disappeared, and I went to bed as usual. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was not in my bed any longer. I was naked and I was paralyzed. The beings I saw were about 3.5 feet tall. They were naked. They were off-white. They were not gray. They had huge heads, huge wrap-around black eyes, tiny little bodies.
There are many stories of grays abducting humans into their spaceships, and even of being inseminated with alien reproductive material and then conceiving human-alien hybrid babies and having those fetuses removed from their bodies and then grown on the alien spaceships. In some cases, people report going back onto the spaceship and being able to see these hybrid offspring.
I was being used for my DNA. They were creating hybrid children from my eggs, someone else's sperm, and combining it with their DNA and their sperm. I would be implanted with an alien fetus, and they would leave the fetus in my body for a few months. Then they would bring me back again later, and then they would remove it. It was horrific. It was terrifying.
You can't have so many people saying that they've been abducted and not have some possibility of truth with that. I think it's happening. I don't know if it's a hybridization program for these ETs or whether they're trying to bring these hybrids back to this planet one day when the environment changes. But in my opinion, something very strange is happening to these people who claim to be abducted.
Could it be that extraterrestrial beings are abducting not only individuals, but also families? And if so, why?
The abduction phenomenon is intergenerational. When a man and a woman marry, and either the man or the woman is an abductee, their children will be abductees.
It seems that specific bloodlines are involved here. And if that's the case, it raises the intriguing possibility that the extraterrestrials are interested in human biology, that they are monitoring specific genetic lines for some purpose.
For ancient astronaut theorists and UFO researchers, the notion that extraterrestrials are conducting experiments involving human biology is not a new one. Many believe the practice has been going on for thousands of years.
Maybe there's some truth to these entities which we call shadim. These are old legends of people who are abducted, sexually seduced, and some taken away. And when we hear today about the numerous stories of alien abductions throughout history, they are identical.
For proof that their theories about the biological nature of alien abductions are valid, researchers point to the fact that a relatively high number of abductees, more than 60%, have an extraordinarily rare blood type, Rh negative.
The subject kept coming up from the abductees. I'm Rh negative. Could it have anything to do with why I'm being abducted? I got to collaborate with a doctor, Dr. John Altshuler, and he did pathology, he did blood work, and he gave the conclusion that Rh negative blood might actually be a genetic data point about why humans could be hybrids, that every Rh negative would be coming from a history of abductions.
Rh negative is a very peculiar thing. First off, it didn't exist until 35,000 years ago. It may have been that 35,000 years ago, ET introduced this into our society through whatever breeding programs they've been running.
The ancient astronaut theory suggests that for thousands of years, extraterrestrials meddled with our DNA. There was a time when we were Homo sapiens, and then we became Homo sapiens sapiens. And that happened within only 50,000 years, which by Darwinian evolutionary standards is too short of a time span for that to happen. Our brain volume increased by up to 30% in 50,000 years, which is absolutely crazy. Now, the reason why I think that modern-day abductions occur is because maybe we are still being manipulated with our DNA from extraterrestrials in order to turn us from Homo sapiens sapiens into Homo sapiens sapiens sapiens.
Sydney, Australia, July 1992. Peter Curry awakes to find himself paralyzed and unable to talk, but fully conscious. He feels a weight pressing down on him, and as his eyes adjust to the darkness, he notices a woman with very strange features straddling his body.
I got the shock of my life because right on top of me was this female, a blonde female. She was just milky white in color. Her eyes were probably 2-3 times bigger than her human eyes. She had protruding cheekbones and a narrow face that narrowed down to a pointy chin. And on the side of the bed, on the corner of the bed, there was another female, an Asian-looking female. And then the blonde female touches her stomach and points to the sky.
The visitors then disappeared, but not without leaving behind proof that they were there. A single blonde hair. Curry took this piece of evidence to an independent genealogy lab, where biochemist Horace Drew subjected the hair to DNA analysis. The results were not what he expected.
It was very unusual because most people's hair is yellow or brown or black, and this was optically clear like nylon fishing line. There's nobody who has hair on Earth which is optically clear. Normally, a human hair only has one kind of DNA type. In the shaft above the hair, we got a very rare Chinese lineage, about 0.1%, 1% of ethnic Chinese. And then in the other part, we actually got blue-eyed, Celtic, light-skinned lineage. This shows authentically unusual DNA, which is fairly rare, which Peter couldn't just have picked up in his bedroom or off the street.
The Pitakuri hair sample yielded very unusual DNA results that just aren't easy to explain in normal, conventional human DNA sequences. You can't really keep dismissing it all as sort of fantasies of the mind or sexual fantasies. And while it didn't absolutely prove that it was alien, because we're only dealing with one hair sample, it did nevertheless prove that we're dealing with something quite unusual.
When we see DNA evidence in the hair of something that doesn't match up with what we would expect to be, old Gaelic DNA mixed with Chinese DNA in blonde hair, the storylines don't add up unless we start to invoke the idea of abduction and genetic interbreeding going back for many thousands of years, all the way to the dawn of history.
(610 AD), the ancient city of Mecca. Historical Islamic accounts in the Hadith say that Muhammad, the last great prophet, was sent by God to unite the Arabian Peninsula tribes under a single religion of Islam. Before forming Islam, Muhammad is said to have retreated to a mountain cave where he received a series of revelations from God.
Muhammad would take a period of time each year to reflect and pray in a cave in the mountains nearby. During one of these retreats, the angel Gabriel came to him and had a prophecy for him and was his guide throughout his ministry.
The angel Gabriel is somebody who is known in the Old Testament. He makes appearances there. He also announces the birth of Jesus and John the Baptist in a Christian context. Now, when it comes to Muhammad, we're seeing that this angel is all of a sudden far more important.
According to Muslim legend, Muhammad formed an intense relationship with Gabriel. During Muhammad's retreats, Gabriel is said to have given the prophet the complete text to the Quran.
In the case of Muhammad, what we're seeing is he stays with him for 23 years. He reveals the Quran to him. And it really, once again, shows you that there are these messengers of the gods, these entities who come to us, human beings, and say, you are chosen. If you're willing to listen to us and work with us, we will actually teach you information about the divine.
Now the angel said to Muhammad, I will take you with me. And they fly over the earth. He sees the whole planet. They circle the earth. And then the angel brings Muhammad back to the cave. They were surrounding the earth very, very quick because it probably took one and a half minute, the whole surrounding around the earth.
Is it possible, as some ancient astronaut theorists believe, that Muhammad was repeatedly taken and seeded with information over time in a series of extraterrestrial abductions? Researchers point to one particular interaction between Gabriel and Muhammad when the prophet flees the holy city of Mecca in the direction of Jerusalem.
The angel Gabriel came to Muhammad with a creature, a winged horse, the Buraq, who was able to fly him to Jerusalem some distance. It was called the farthest mosque. And they meditated there for a time. And then after some time of visit there, he went to heaven and was able to visit with the prophets, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and then with Yahweh, Allah, God himself, and get insights and inspiration, then came back from the heavens to Jerusalem and back from Jerusalem to Mecca, completely inspired for his further teachings.
It is said that he goes from Mecca to Jerusalem in a single night. This is a physical impossibility. It simply cannot be. Now, rather than take this allegorically, if we take it literally, we're actually given the tools and the explanation as to why this might have been possible. We're actually told that he did this with the help of the angel Gabriel.
Might this tale describe a physical abduction in which Muhammad is taken to other dimensions, including heaven, by the angel Gabriel? The Sinai Peninsula, Egypt. In the Judeo-Christian Bible, as found in the book of Exodus, Moses receives the 10 Commandments from God after disappearing on Mount Sinai for a period of 40 days and 40 nights. When the prophet returns to his people, his appearance has drastically changed.
It's very interesting. He had been around this God for so long. His face was glowing, and he had to literally cover himself because people were afraid of him because he had changed, his countenance had changed so much.
Basically, his people recognize him, but also see that he has physically changed. And so this is very interesting because if you were to take it from a biblical perspective, you would think that an encounter with God is something nice, something phenomenal, but not that it has physical effects. In the case of the Moses encounter, what you have is something very physical, something very specific, suggestive that what happened to him is a very physical encounter with a deity, an extraterrestrial being, rather than what we would generally classify as divine.
If we look at it from the context of today's alien abduction stories, you know, was God coming down from the sky actually a UFO descending? Was he taken aboard, abducted onto a UFO, and held for 40 days, and then returned? I think, you know, if we look at it in that context, we've got what sounds like a classic abduction.
Could the biblical accounts of Enoch and Moses suggest an extraterrestrial agenda? One where alien beings communicate messages of peace and harmony with humans. Northeast Syria, the Kabur River. According to the Hebrew Bible, it was here, in the 6th century BC, that divine beings descended from heaven and made contact with a 30-year-old Hebrew priest named Ezekiel.
Ezekiel was by the river Chebar, and he said a great whirlwind came toward him. He described it as a fire enfolding itself, and out of the fire was the color of amber, which is the Hebrew word, which means polished spectrum metal, which implies that it's metallic and that it's spinning. And it lands in front of him, right directly in front of him, and suddenly, out of this whirlwind come 4 creatures.
In the Bible, the prophet Ezekiel calls these spiritual beings cherubims and describes them as having 4 faces, 4 wings, and skin that shone like polished bronze.
Ezekiel says that he was taken up into the sky and taken to different places where he could see different things. And then he was told some of the future things that were going to come.
But what in fact was the mysterious object that touched down in front of Ezekiel and lifted him up to the sky? And who were the strange beings that emerged and shared a vision of the future with the prophet?
He described them as the likeness of a man, but they seem to have different faces on them of different animals, and some people have interpreted that as perhaps even like a spacesuit. You know, imagine the helmet, oxygen mask, that kind of thing. Could he have been actually seeing something that was a face but didn't look like a face normally looks?
He's got the best description of a UFO that's anywhere in the Bible. because he basically says that the thing looked like a wheel within a wheel, kind of a classic flying saucer description.
It is basically the account of a guy who's been abducted, who has been told certain things, and who's then returned to the place of origin. It would be what we today would describe as an abduction account.
Pacific Palisades, California, July 17th, 2015, 5 p.m. Police are alerted that inside an abandoned SUV parked on a residential street is a dead body. The badly decomposed corpse is sent to the coroner's office so that identification of the victim can be made. Although foul play is not suspected, as police continue to investigate, the case takes a bizarre turn. The body is identified by his fiancée as 60-year-old Jeffrey Allen Lash. Los Angeles police find more than 1,200 guns and 7 tons of ammunition, along with numerous militarized vehicles and $230,000 in cash inside of his home. His fiancée reports that Lash had proclaimed to be an alien hybrid, secretly working for the government.
But it's the weirdest story I think I've ever heard. His girlfriend, and she seems to be pretty normal and legit, claims that he's an alien hybrid, that he was placed on this planet to do something specifically. Nothing adds up about his case, nothing.
When examining the body, the coroner's office could not find any fingerprints, even though fingerprints are the last skin tissue to decompose.
Lash apparently had no fingerprints. His fiancée believed that he was an alien hybrid. And we have to wonder who this guy was. Was he really an alien hybrid, as he said? Why did he have all these weapons?
Within the UFO research community, there's been a great deal of controversy surrounding Lash's story because there's been a suggestion that his father, Jeffrey Lash, may have worked on the Roswell incident crash. That's to say, he was a scientist who may have been brought in to study the wreckage. And so for that reason, the story has been elevated to an even bigger level, that there was some sort of infiltration of society going on.
A number of people who have claimed that they've been abducted by extraterrestrials also claim that they've witnessed what they say are alien human hybrids. And this would indicate that the extraterrestrials have a program of manipulating people and their DNA to genetically alter us slightly. And perhaps this has been going on for thousands of years, and that even as we are today, we've been manipulated subtly by extraterrestrials, and this is still going on.
Is it possible that there are already aliens living among us, and that our governments are fully aware of this? Could this be the culmination of years of extraterrestrial abductions?
Our decisions here as a species could very well be affecting these other civilizations. So they may be, in a sense, intervening on their own behalf. They might not really care about whether we make it or not.
If invasion and takeover of the planet were the goal of these extraterrestrial biological entities, they are so advanced, it could be done easily. Therefore, invasion and takeover of the world cannot be their goal. And if that is not the goal, then what is the goal? What is the alien agenda?
You have a sort of dichotomy of, are we being invaded by terrible extraterrestrials who are trying to take over our planet? Or are the extraterrestrials really trying to help us, and that this has been an ongoing thing for many thousands of years?
I think these abduction stories are all part of a larger plan. A plan going on for a very long time. This, what we are experiencing now, is the next step, where we are now learning that we are not alone and that they soon will come back, because that is what they promised in the ancient texts.
Hove, England, 2008. In the middle of the night, 20-year-old Charmaine de Rosario Sage is sleeping in bed when she awakens to a frightening sight. A reptilian humanoid staring down at her.
I woke up. A reptilian came into the room. We went to an underground cave. There was a group of reptilians there, and they stood around me in a circle. Each one of them put one hand on my body, and I slowly changed. And it was the most amazing, but also sort of bizarre situation to look down at your body and see it morph from your human form into a reptilian form. To see the skin shift from being smooth into scales, and to find that I had a tail.
Could Charmaine's incredible story be true? Was she really transformed into a reptilian-human hybrid? Charmaine claims she learned from her abductors that all humans today are byproducts of alien genetic manipulation, some more than others.
At certain points in our history, different ET races have come to this planet, and they have not manipulated all of humanity, but certain groups.
The reason and agenda for alien intelligences to be on this planet manipulating humans and animals is because there are wars out there between different types of intelligences about territory. And that those territorial wars involve populations of created and manipulated life.
If reptilian extraterrestrials have inhabited Earth for thousands of years, are they content to continue hiding out underground? Or is the day fast approaching where they will step out of the shadows and announce their presence once again?
Christians are waiting for the return of Jesus. The Jews are waiting for the return of the Messiah. The Islamic community is waiting for the return of Muhammad. The idea of this return did not originate with any of those religious figures, but it in fact originated with the promise by extraterrestrials that they would return in the future.
Tradition tells us that the army of the Messiah is not to come from heaven, but is to arise from inner earth, and therefore dominate the surface world.
Perhaps we are now at this special turning point in our history and the timeline of planet Earth, where the reptilians and the other extraterrestrials will announce themselves.
Leipzig, Germany, 2010. Biologists, led by Svante Pääbo of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, make a stunning announcement. They have determined that early humans not only coexisted on Earth with other more primitive hominids, they also mated with them. But even more astonishing was their finding that another, as yet unidentified species, may also be represented in human DNA.
Up until now, most people have been familiar with the typical DNA model of human evolution, in which you have a very nicely defined progression from previous types of human or hominid life up to anatomically modern humans. That's not true anymore. And what we're seeing is evidence that there could have been interbreeding with what the actual mainstream media is calling mystery species of humans. An anthropologist from the University of Wisconsin, Dr. John Hawks, did a comprehensive analysis of human DNA going back for many thousands of years, and what he found was astonishing. If you look at the DNA from someone in 3000 BC, and you compare that to the DNA of someone alive today, it has changed by 7%.
Mapping the human genome, Dr. Hawks found that in the past 5,000 years, our DNA has evolved at a rate 100 times greater than any previous 5,000-year period in our history.
So what happened in the last 5,000 years that altered the structure of human DNA by 7%? Is it possible that extraterrestrial humans interbred with us sometime in the last 5,000 years, and that could account for these monumental changes in the structure of human DNA?
Could it be that our ancestors are not only hominids who lived here on Earth, but also beings from beyond our world? Ancient astronaut theorists claim that evidence of this can be found in stories throughout history that depict humans mating with gods.
Throughout world cultures and mythologies, this idea of otherworldly beings, gods, supernatural beings, demons, having sex with humans is very, very common. The way that we interpret that experience depends on the cultural and religious factors around us.
We can read about these accounts of all sorts of weird beings who had their way with humans. All we have to do is to approach these stories and look at them from a modern perspective, to eliminate the always suggested symbolism and look at these events for what they potentially really were: encounters with extraterrestrials.
There is abundant, undeniable evidence of human and extraterrestrial interbreeding. It's in so many different cultures that to suggest that it's all a conspiracy theory or a myth or a fantasy is completely illogical.
Sydney, Australia, July 1992. Peter Curry awakes to find himself paralyzed and unable to talk, but fully conscious. He feels a weight pressing down on him, and as his eyes adjust to the darkness, he notices a woman with very strange features straddling his body.
I got the shock of my life because right on top of me was this female, a blonde female. She was just milky white in color. Her eyes were probably 2-3 times bigger than her human eyes. She had protruding cheekbones and a narrow face that narrowed down to a pointy chin. And on the side of the bed, on the corner of the bed, there was another female, an Asian-looking female. And then the blonde female touches her stomach and points to the sky.
The visitors then disappeared, but not without leaving behind proof that they were there. A single blonde hair. Curry took this piece of evidence to an independent genealogy lab, where biochemist Horace Drew subjected the hair to DNA analysis. The results were not what he expected.
It was very unusual because most people's hair is yellow or brown or black, and this was optically clear like nylon fishing line. There's nobody who has hair on Earth which is optically clear. Normally, a human hair only has one kind of DNA type. In the shaft above the hair, we got a very rare Chinese lineage, about 0.1%, 1% of ethnic Chinese. And then in the other part, we actually got blue-eyed, Celtic, light-skinned lineage. This shows authentically unusual DNA, which is fairly rare, which Peter couldn't just have picked up in his bedroom or off the street.
The Peter Curry hair sample yielded very unusual DNA results that just aren't easy to explain in normal, conventional human DNA sequences. You can't really keep dismissing it all as sort of fantasies of the mind or sexual fantasies. And And while it didn't absolutely prove that it was alien, because we're only dealing with one hair sample, it did nevertheless prove that we're dealing with something quite unusual.
When we see DNA evidence in the hair of something that doesn't match up with what we would expect to be, old Gaelic DNA mixed with Chinese DNA in blonde hair, the storylines don't add up unless we start to invoke the idea of abduction and genetic interbreeding going back for many thousands of years, all the way to the dawn of history.
Almaty, Kazakhstan, May 2013. Mathematician Vladimir Sherbak and astrobiologist Maxim Makukov publish a study they have conducted on the human genome. Their research has led them to the shocking conclusion that there is a hidden code within our DNA, one that contains precise mathematical patterns and an unknown symbolic language.
They looked into the human genome and they found what appeared to be an extraterrestrial stamp on our genetic code. And it operated very much like a mathematical type of code.
The odds of this sequence occurring 9 times in the randomness of our genetic code is 1 in 10 trillion. Finally, someone has come across the one piece of evidence that I've always said we need in order to prove the ancient astronaut theory. I always said it'll never be a crashed spaceship or a ray gun that will dig somewhere in the sand, but it will be found within our own DNA.
For ancient astronaut theorists, the news offered compelling evidence that mankind's DNA was deliberately manipulated by an extraterrestrial intelligence sometime in the ancient past.
The ancient astronaut theory suggests that at some point, extraterrestrials targeted our DNA with an artificial mutation of our genes. And if this is true, then some have argued that we are, in a sense, organic robots, because through that manipulation of our genes, we were given intelligence. So it was done artificially, which means AI, artificial intelligence.
Organic robots programmed by extraterrestrials? Could such an audacious concept even be remotely true? As far as ancient astronaut theorists are concerned, not only is the answer yes, but it provides the reason why humans have such a strong affinity to not only create cybernetically enhanced versions of themselves, but to merge with them.
So could this be evidence that just as these advanced extraterrestrial civilizations may have programmed us humans at a genetic level, that now we're actually programming these artificially intelligent robotic beings in the same manner to carry on this agenda that was started long ago by the seeding of this planet from these extraterrestrial civilizations.
Qasr al-Yahud, Israel. Here, tens of thousands of Christians make their way to what is believed to be the site of Christ's baptism in the River Jordan. It was also here that, according to Scripture, God revealed himself as being made up of 3 divine persons: God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, otherwise known as the Holy Trinity.
In the story of Jesus' baptism, Jesus is standing in the Jordan River, and we're told that the heavens open up, and the Holy Spirit, in the form of a dove, descends upon Jesus. And the voice of God booms out of heaven and says, "This is my Son, whom I love and in whom I am well pleased." So in that scene, all 3 parts of the Trinity are represented there: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
What makes it a mathematical conundrum is how can you be 1 and 3? So it is a mystery, and some people don't even question it because it is a matter of faith. And so, made in that image, we could make the argument that there's a trinity within each and every one of us.
Could the triune nature of God, as described in the New Testament, also exist in all of mankind? And if so, does this suggest that the power of 3 might somehow connect humanity with divine, or as some would believe, extraterrestrial forces? Ancient astronaut theorists believe the answers can be found not only in the Bible, but encoded within the genetic blueprint of the human body. Huntington, New York, 1966. Scientists announce one of the greatest breakthroughs of modern science. They have successfully deciphered the genetic code. After years of research, they discover that the universal structure of DNA consists of a series of 3 molecule combinations known as codons, or triplets.
You had this DNA sequence, and it codes for ultimately the proteins in your body. And the question was, how does it code for that? Does each individual base pair represent something? Is it 2 at a time that represent something? Is it a sequence of 10? And it turns out that it's very clear it comes in clusters of 3.
Essentially, the number 3 is the key to our DNA language. And this was revolutionary for its time because the ancient alien theory has always suggested that the ultimate proof of extraterrestrial tampering in our past will not come in the form of a crashed spaceship or some type of tools, but the actual proof will come from within our own DNA.